It's simple, really. Great stories with a good cup of tea. It's the Tea with Mike show. On this episode of the Tea with Mike show, we welcomed Coleman Kintop to the show. Themes of the show was street photography and media. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, and enjoy. Alright guys, welcome to another episode of the Tea with Mike show. Joining me for this one is Coleman. Welcome to Tea with Mike, Coleman.
Hi.
Awesome. So do you want to start by telling everyone a little bit about you and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a digital content creator. I do all kinds of digital media. Right now I'm working on a sound mix. It's for a Tell a Story Hive pilot called Ginger Beef, and it's about a Chinese girl who has to kind of try and fit into a really prissy white high school, and her parents are very traditional, and she's kind of like a second generation immigrant and just trying to kind of find her way. So that's pretty exciting, and that has secured some CBC funding, so we'll hopefully be able to continue.
That's really cool, man.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to get like an actual show made, and so that's exciting. That'll be a lot of fun to keep working on the sound mix for that series. Other than that, I'm a street photographer, so I like to go out downtown and in alleys and neighborhoods and photograph everyone and everything pretty indiscriminately. I did that just the other day. I was downtown and I was just blown away with how many people there were. It was insane. It was like, yeah, during the pandemic, I went out a few times pretty cautiously to do some street photography. And the downtown core was just, it was nothing but homeless people, cops, bus drivers, transit officers, and kind of, some sketchy type looking people. So I've posted some of that on my Instagram. One of them that I really, really liked was the guy with the underwear on his head. But during that same day, we met so many interesting people and had lots of really good conversations. There was this one guy, I haven't posted the photos yet, but there was this one guy who had like, I don't know, something was really messed up with one of his fingers on his hand, and we were just taking all these photographs of his hand, and we were talking to him because the guy that I go out with all the time, my business partner, Gregory Rogalski, he's been doing this for a very long time. It's kind of crazy how I met him, actually. I bumped into him by chance one day when I was going out on my very first street photography adventure, and we tried to see each other after that, but it didn't really happen because he didn't have a phone and it was just hard scheduling things. And then like a year later, I went out just on a whim. It was like, well, I'm just playing Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm sitting at home in my underwear and I'm taking a bath in this game. What am I doing? I should go out and see the actual world. It's a nice day. So I did that, and I bumped into him on Stephen Avenue, and we just started shooting together, and we bumped into a few other people that he knew, but it just became this awesome photo walk where we took all these great pictures, and he really pushes me to get outside of my comfort zone and take pictures of people that I normally wouldn't. But yeah, just the best thing about being a street photographer is actually engaging with your subjects and, talking to them and making them smile and hearing their stories. Like that's a big one during the pandemic that we did a lot, was we'd just go downtown, and virtually every homeless person we saw, we would approach them and say hi and give them a little bit of change and ask for their story. And we got some really insane stories out of it. I filmed a few. I haven't put anything together. I just moved, so
Awesome.
I haven't had a lot of time to be on the computer lately, but yeah, I've got a lot of good content that is just sitting on my hard drive waiting to be cut. So I'm looking forward to doing some of that soon.
Awesome, man. And so just for context, first off, do you just want to tell people like where you're from?
Yeah, for sure. So I was born in Abbotsford, BC, lived there for like 6 months, and then my parents were like, yeah, we're going to Calgary. So I've been here in Calgary for most of my life. I consider myself a Calgarian, definitely not an Abbotsfordian. And yeah, I'm just based in Calgary. I'd like to get out of the city at some point. And then as far as my educational roots, I went to Sait, the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, and I took their film and video production course. I actually applied twice and got in on the second time because I was just very persistent.
What happened? Okay, what happened the first time? What did they give a reason?
So they never really give a reason. It's always just like, it was really great to see you, but there are other people that we want to accept instead of you, so sorry. But I think the first time I was just kind of thrown off. So you when you apply, you have to put together a huge application package, which involves doing like a career study and talking about yourself and interviewing people, kind of like you're doing right now. So I did some pretty good interviews with some reputable people, but then you have to go to the school and submit that whole package, like a hard copy of it. And when you do that, you're there with all of the other people from that wave of applications, and almost all the instructors are there, and they just strike fear into your heart. Like, that is their whole goal, is to just make you realize that this program is really difficult. You won't get a lot of sleep. You're going to turn into a zombie in the second year, and it's not going to be all fun and games. But you know, if media is what you really want to do, then you should pursue this. So the first time that I did it, maybe I wasn't so sure of myself, and maybe I didn't really know what to expect. I wasn't expecting all of the instructors to be there and to just be saying, this is really difficult. Maybe this isn't for you. Everyone, you should reconsider your whole life right now.
That's a strange approach to take, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Why do you think that's how they have it set up? Is it a competitive program? Or what's the kind of deal?
So I think last year they doubled their capacity. Like, now, instead of taking only 30 students a year, they take 60. But even that is pretty small, and they get tons and tons of applications. So I think what they're trying to do is just weed through all of the people who lack, I don't really want to say the confidence, but just rather, I think, the conviction that this is what they want to do, you know? So they're trying to just weed through those people who don't have that conviction and hopefully scare those people off, because it really is difficult. And a lot of the time people end up dropping out for one reason or another. Like, we had a lady drop out, not her fault at all. It was just something messed up with her visa. Like, her home country wouldn't.
Oh, no way.
You know? Yeah. But then there were other people who just, it really wasn't for them. This one guy, he left after the first year, and he went on to do like, he started like a prop company with his dad. I'm not really sure how that's doing, but yeah. And then there was this other dude who left after the first year, and his dad had really big connections in media already, and he just felt like he was wasting his time at Sait and his money at Sait. And so he was like, well, I was here, I've got my connections, I've got the first year of knowledge, I don't really need to do anything else. I'm going to go work as a PA on some advertisements. So that's what he did. And he was really successful, and he's still really successful. He just decided, you know, I feel like I've got it. I don't need to spend any more time here. And I think I know what I want to do already. So, you know, more power to him, I guess, you know?
Awesome. So let's just go back for a second. Was there anything that you changed from your first application versus your second application?
There definitely was.
What did you change?
Yeah, so I don't think I changed anything from like the package. Maybe I updated my resume just with some preliminary stuff. But I think the main thing was just having just more confidence in that room, because all of the instructors are kind of sizing up all the students, and they're kind of getting like a first impression of you. So if you go in and you're all nervous and you're sweating and you're just really anxious and you're just like not talking to people and you just like this, then they're going to be like, okay, that person, no, we don't want them. But if you strut in there and they see you and you engage with them, and maybe you crack a joke, you know, you try to get on a first name basis with one of them, that definitely helps. But the other thing, I haven't mentioned this yet, but both times I went in, they have you sit in a computer room, and you have to do this questionnaire, right? So, but the questionnaire is like, it's like a creative writing kind of thing. So I guess they're just trying to test how creative you are, how much you think outside the box, and also what kind of a worker you are, like what kind of a team player you are. Because when you're working on a film, you're part of an army, right? So when I did it the first time, I had no idea what I was walking into. Didn't realize I was even going to have to write anything about myself. But the second time around, it was like, okay, I know. It's been a year, so I know more about myself, because
Right.
I'd like to think that you learn more about yourself every year. But the other thing is that I was prepared. I thought, okay, I roughly know what they're going to want me to do. And one of them was this writing exercise. So they gave you like 3 objects, and they tell you to write like a little short story based on these 3 elements, right? And so I think the one that I got was like dog, spaghetti, and like flying saucer. And I wrote this ridiculous story about this dude who's running through a white hallway when he wakes up, and there are these massive dogs on their hind legs, and they're like slurping spaghetti and trying to dissect them in their UFO or whatever. It was just this ridiculous, like, I don't know what I was thinking, but it worked. They seemed to like it, and they shortlisted me. So just really, don't be afraid. Just think outside the box when you're doing those weird writing prompt things, and also just be good at solving conflict and resolving conflict, because that's another one of the questions they ask you is like, tell me about a time when you've experienced conflict in the workplace and what you did to resolve it.
Question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. So has being creative and media, photography, etc., has it always kind of been a part of your childhood? And has anyone influenced that journey?
Yeah, definitely. So my mom was a photojournalist, and she worked for the Edson Sun. Edson is just a little, yeah, I'm sure you know about Edson.
You're from Edson. Only because I know someone that was in a theater program from Edson.
Oh, cool. So yeah, she was a journalist, and she took pictures, and then she wrote stories about the pictures, and she did all these grip and grins, but then I remember growing up, she had a few kind of artistic photos around the house that she had done. Like there was this one black and white long exposure from like an overpass, and it's looking down on this big like traffic interchange, and it's a long exposure, so you have all these cool light trails, and it's in black and white, so it's all kind of mysterious. So that kind of always stuck out to me. Like I can recall that image and the frame that it's in, and I think that image just had a really big impression on me and made me want to get into photography, because it's like, how did you do this? How did you get all these cool light trails? Like how's that even possible?
That's true. That's super neat. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was my mom, and then I don't know. It's really hard to say. Like I went to China in 2013, and that was for the International Youth Leadership Summit, which was honestly kind of just a dog and pony show that the Chinese and other governments of the world were running to make it seem like there's more unity or whatever, or show the world that China's not such a bad place. It was so curated. But I took like a really terrible little Fuji Finepix camera on that trip, and I got some really like surprisingly good shots out of it that I just wasn't expecting to get. Like I got this one photograph of this security guard on this really crappy looking like fixed gear bicycle with a basket, and he's smoking a cigarette and just giving me this kind of look. And I just thought, wow, like I took that photo. That's real. Like I actually made that in China. Like that's real life. And that's just on the streets of Beijing. So like, why can't I do that here? I totally can do that here. So it prompted me to go out and start shooting, and I didn't have a camera, so I had to get one. And I wanted to be, I was a total hipster in high school. I guess I kind of still am. So of course I had to go with like the most hipster camera possible, which was the Holga 135, right? It's like lomography, right? It's this plastic camera. There's no light meter. You don't have much aperture control. You have a choice between like f8 and f11 or 11 and 16, and that's it. The focus is completely manual, and it's not even a rangefinder. It's just the lens just is screwed onto the camera, and you've got a viewfinder, and it's not connected to anything, and it's all made of plastic. So it's literally just a plastic box with like a spring-loaded shutter release and a terrible viewfinder. And I shot with that so much.
So you can't actually adjust your shutter speed?
No. Okay, you can, but it's cloudy or sunny. So I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay. Nothing else.
I think it only goes from like I think one of them is 250th and the other is like a 500th, and that's it. You can't. Yeah, you have minimal control. It's like the ultimate point and shoot camera, in that you just point and shoot. And even in lomography, one of the central tenets in lomography is like shooting from the hip, which just means not even looking through the viewfinder and just firing off shots willy-nilly, which when you're shooting with 35 millimeter film, it's not cheap to do that. So I didn't do much of it, to be honest. I'd always look at the viewfinder, but I shot with film for the better part of like 3 or 4 years. And of course I kept upgrading my collection. I started with that little Holga. Eventually I got the blue original like 120 Holga, which shoots medium format, 120 film. And that was a revelation, but it was exactly the same, just with different films. So it was still prone to all the same issues, if not even more. Crazy light leaks that would come in. I had to like duct tape the sides to make sure that it wasn't going to flare all over the place. And then I got a whole bunch more. I don't know. They're all up on this wall over here. But then I got a Pentax SLR, and that's when my photography really started to get serious, because now I can I can see through the lens, and oh my God, I can control the shutter speed, sort of, and I can change the aperture. Oh, f2? Whoa.
What does this one do? Yeah.
Look at that blurry background at f2. So that kind of really got me started.
Gotcha. And so obviously film and photography equipment is very expensive. So how good are you? How do you budget when you need new pieces of equipment?
That's a really good question. I really don't. I can't even say. I mean, I'm so bad at spending too much money on gear, to be honest. But mostly what I would try to do is, so of course it's an investment, right? So if you've got a little bit of extra cash laying around, or maybe you just got your tax return back and you got a surplus,
right, that's a good one.
Maybe you're just saving up. The whole thing is that you have to make that initial investment, and then once you do, it's not really that hard to you can find ways to make money with that investment if you're good enough, and if you've got some connections, if you know some people who can get you some work. But B, it's also pretty easy to just either side grade. So if you've got something that's almost good for but you need to switch to something that's basically the same thing, but it gives you a few more features and takes away a few, you can do a side grade, and then it's not really an upgrade, but it's better than if you were to just sit around, and it doesn't really cost you anything.
Gotcha. So you're saying you need to be kind of flexible, like work with what you've got to.
Oh, certainly, yeah. Work with what you've got. Like my first serious digital camera, was a Sony RX10 from 2013.
Oh yeah.
It's a little bridge camera with a Zeiss lens, which is pretty nice. It's got Zeiss glass, but of course it's correcting for so much distortion because it's got that tiny little 1-inch sensor, and it's got to account for all that zoom. It's got like a 24 to 200 mil lens, which is just absurd for that cheap price point, which is why I could not resist. And then I got a Fuji, and yeah, it was all downhill from there.
Cool. So photography and film obviously have similarities, and they also have differences. So do you want to talk a little bit to some of the similarities and differences, kind of in terms of skill set that you need for both?
For sure. I mean, as far as similarities go, your composition and framing are always going to be pretty much the same. It depends on the aspect ratio, because a lot of still photography, it's done in like a 3:4 aspect ratio, whereas cinema is almost always, the slimmer. You've got your 16:9, you've got your 2:35:1. So you have to account for that lack of, I guess, tallness, lack of height in the frame a little bit. But everyone is so used to seeing movies that it's really not hard to compensate, and you can get pretty similar results either way. So framing and composition pretty much stays the same with all of the technical stuff with the camera. I mean, this feed that I'm running to you right now is coming out of Sony A7R2, which is what I use for stills, but I also use it for video. And it's all the same controls. The only real thing about cinema that you have to deal with that can make it a little harder, especially if you're going to be shooting outside, is if you want to have that nice kind of blurred background or nice shallow depth of field, you'd need to get some ND filters. And this is something everyone just forgets about. This is something I've forgotten about. But the fact is, if you want something to look like a real movie, it has to be outputting at either a 48th or a 50th of a second, right? You need to get that 180-degree shutter, right? So that it doesn't look too,
Gotcha. So
I guess, choppy.
Yeah, so kind of quality.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you need the ND filter, because without the ND filter, you can't have that slow shutter speed of a 50th of a second per frame, right? It's just going to be really overexposed. Even if you're shooting at your lowest ISO, if you're wide open on a really good lens, it's just going to be blown out. So you got to get some ND filters, and that's really difficult when you can't screw them in. So invest in a mounted one. Get the square ones that mount on it.
And then differences between the two?
Differences between the two. Video takes up so much more space. Just get ready to buy way more hard drives than you would have to for stills. And it also kills your battery a lot faster.
I'll add to that, even like just doing the Teawithmike show, which is in terms of like it's two people talking for like 30 minutes, but even that takes up a crazy amount of space. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, seriously, it does. And yeah,
I think I already have like maybe 100 gig of videos.
Oh man, yeah.
And then I compress them too and stuff, and then like do the best I can, but even still, the files are big, man.
Oh yeah, you can't get away from it. You can only compress so much. Yeah, so huge files, way more storage space. And then when you're doing video, there's so many different types of photography, right? Like there's street photography, there's nature photography, there's wedding photography, there's architecture, there's sports, like all these different kinds of photography. And with video, you can still do all of that. Like it doesn't really change. It's just you need with video there needs to be more of a purpose. I guess it's a philosophical question sort of. I don't know if you've seen Surveillance Cameraman, but it's this guy who just goes out and he just records people and they get really, really offended, and all he says ever is, it's just a video. It's just a video, right? And so you can take it to that extreme and just go out and shoot video of people, just like you would with street photography. But it's almost worse than street photography, because with street photography, you can pop off a quick shot and then keep walking, and they just cross your path and they look back and they're like, but with video, you kind of, to get the best out of your subjects, you kind of have to stick around. And that can lead to some dire situations.
And can you expand maybe a little bit on why you think video needs more purpose? Are you just talking in terms of the framing and the type of shot that you're going for?
I'd say that's a really good question. So I'd say with video, it's better to set out with an intent, because if you just are recording all the time, you're going to get so much crap that you just have to delete, or
Right,
it's
it's
just going
all
to live
gonna
on your
look
hard
the
drive and
same,
take up
isn't it?
space, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it's the space thing, but it's also, I find that it's so much harder to wade through all the videos that I've taken versus being able to see all my photographs, right? Because if I've got one video and it's just really long, I'm going to have to open it up in a player and scrub around and figure out like what's happening at all those different times in the video. But with stills, a still is a still. That's the whole thing right there. You don't have to play it or anything. It's just displayed on your screen. So with video, that's the biggest challenge I find when I'm doing like candid street photography video, if that's even a thing. It's just harder to find the good parts, right? Like you can usually just look at a thumbnail of a photo and be like, okay, that's a good photo. But with video, maybe there's like 10 minutes that's just awful, but there's 2 minutes in there that you can totally use. It's just finding it, and having to deal with video editing programs as well as a whole other thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then, so I think this was a good time for a little tea fact for the episode. So the first tea book written was named Cha Ching. And since then, obviously, tea has proved quite a profitable asset for beverage companies and consumers around the world. And that comes from, I don't like this part, but it comes from royalcupofcoffee.com. It's weird. It's weird because it's called royalcupofcoffee.com, but no joke, it has a whole bunch of like tea facts on it too. So it's kind of weird.
Oh yeah, they're not biased.
It's good not to be biased. So how important is it to not be biased when you're creating work?
Pretty
media.
I mean, it depends, right? It depends. It depends what you're doing. You know, if you just want to report the news as is, then there should be no bias. But of course, you're always going to be susceptible to it no matter what you do, right? There's going to be unconscious biases that you can't really do anything about. So you just have to try your best to avoid them consciously through your behavior. But that's just reporting the news. That's just doing candids. If you want to, you know, do a political campaign video, you need to have all of the biases, right? Or if you want to do some marketing kind of type stuff for a product, you definitely need to have some biases. Mainly your biggest bias is that this product is awesome and you should buy it, right?
And it's so much better than the rest. There we go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Also, that was a little side question. So then more in terms of, and through your media and creative work, this is kind of your vision. So correct me if I'm wrong. You really want to bring people together. You want to start conversations, and you basically want to inspire others to contribute to their families, communities, and society. And so my kind of question is, how do you hope to go about sharing that with the world?
Cool. So it's a pretty big, lofty, vague kind of goal, but I would hope that the photography that people see out of me inspires them to go out and connect with people more, right? If you can, and also it's just a lot of it has to do with the stigma of like homeless people, right? So if you go out and you're downtown and you see a homeless person sitting there on the curb or whatever, or having a nap or whatever, you know, a lot of people's, you know, a lot of alert bells start going off in certain people's minds, or maybe they're passing judgment on that person as they walk by. You know, maybe they'll say something horrible to them. And I've talked to so many homeless people, and I've heard so many of their stories, and like 99% of them are just the nicest freaking people that you'll ever talk to. They are just the salt of the earth. You know, I was out shooting last month, and I ran into this group of teenagers, and they were in the Superstore McLeod Trail parking lot, and I just started talking to them, and I was with my business partner Greg, and one of them was in a wheelchair, and she was maybe in her 30s. She's from the East Coast, but the other two were like younger than me. They were just kids, and we just got to talking, and they were talking about all of the bad things that people do to them. Like the high school students around the train stations.
Oh, crazy.
Just calling them names and kicking them and just literally spitting on them, things like that. And so I want to be able to share those stories, and I want to be able to share the stories of just in general about these homeless people who are having to go through all of this, and maybe it'll change those horrible high schoolers' minds by the time they're adults, if they happen to see any of that. The other thing is,
also,
I don't know
so connecting.
Yeah. So the other thing, I don't know if you're like a Nintendo kind of person or you play many video games, but I've been playing Animal Crossing a decent amount, and a lot of other people have been as well. And the whole thing in that game is just, you have to do everything yourself, right? You have to it has to be you to develop your island and to build bridges and make sure that, people have furniture when they move in, and make sure that you can upgrade all your shops and everything, and you can put nice things around the town, and it's all totally up to you. None of the other villagers on the island are going to do anything, and none of the shop owners are going to do anything other than just sell you things. So you have to be the one to completely develop your community all by yourself. And so I just, it's not hard either. You just go out and you press A a few times, and you come back and you press X a few times, and it's this kind of tedious but beautiful grind of a game, and it's just so charming to live inside, and people are just so motivated to make their towns just so amazing, myself included. So if we could take a little bit of that attitude and energy from all of those people who are so passionate about Animal Crossing, bring that into the real world, and have people actually talk to each other when they're out on the street, neighbors actually talking to neighbors. And so
right. That's how close to home it hits. Statistically, the majority of like neighbors don't actually even know each other.
Yeah, for sure.
100%.
Yeah, so if you just treat your whole life like that game, and every chance you get, you see someone, if you go up to them and you press A and you engage in dialogue with them, you're going to learn something, probably. They're probably going to have something really interesting to tell you. Like, that's kind of my thought whenever I go out and do street photography, is that everyone out here has something different to say, and everyone has the potential to tell me something super interesting, and my knowledge of the world will just keep expanding if I keep talking to people.
100% couldn't agree more. So you've literally summed up the whole reason why I'm doing Teawithmike, and just because I love stories, conversation, and I want to learn things from all these different types of people in the world, and so you never know what story you're gonna stumble across. I volunteered a little bit in old people's homes, and old people have some of the best stories going.
Oh yeah.
Actually, if I'm being brutally honest with you, I actually prefer to typically hang out with like older people, because they have more life experience, they have better stories, and often, it's just the way it is, they're often more culturally diverse than, unfortunately, the kind of current generation. So it's no knocking, because I am part of that generation. That's just my perspective and my opinion. But that's what I think.
I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, the guy that I go out with and do shooting with, Gregory, he's 54 years old, so he's not a young guy, and he's got a hell of a lot to teach me, not only about street photography, but like so many other things. So it's nice being able to just keep learning stuff from this dude who just wants to teach me how to be the best street photographer in the world. And He's got this martial arts thing going on too. I don't know. He's a crazy old coot.
And yeah, and just touching on that, yeah, and you may as well accept the fact that these people have obviously lived longer, they've experienced more, so you might as well try and take as much as possible from them, because it's the cliche, you live once and you've only got so many hours to live, right? So if you can learn, if they can teach you so much in a short space of time, that's just going to help you grow as a person.
Yeah, for sure. And it'll help inform the whole generation, hopefully. I mean, that's the whole thing about generativity, is that when you get old, there comes a time when you have to start passing all of that stuff down. Otherwise, it'll just be lost, right? So
that's true. Yeah, and that even stems all the way back to our ancestors, and how the only way to pass on knowledge, right, at the time, was through literally speaking it to the next generation, and then the scribe and the tabloids and all that sort of thing came out. But it was mainly through the voice.
Yeah, well, that's why epic poems were written in that way, written as poems, is so that people could memorize them and then recite them, right? They're not really meant to be read. They're meant to be read out loud. They're meant to be spoken.
Yeah, not written on like manuscripts and that sort of thing. Awesome. So let's transition into what are 3 tips that you have for people, for recent graduates who are just starting their career in the media world. What should they avoid doing?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what you should avoid doing first, and then I'll tell you what you should, I guess, be doing. Don't move away right away, please. Just stay in the city a little bit longer. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of a political answer, but it's true. If you just leave the city that you're from immediately after graduating to go and try and make it big in Hollywood or whatever, unless you're really good at talking to people online, you're probably not going to have many connections out there. So that's going to make it harder for you. You're just going to be an unknown with this piece of paper that says you graduated from this place in Canada. Unless maybe you've got a really good demo reel or a really good sizzle reel or whatever. Maybe, but that's pretty rare. So stick around for a while and try to get some work here. Definitely apply for grants as much as possible. Tell a Story Hive is a really good one. There are some other ones. I think the Alberta Media Foundation has one. If I'm probably wrong though. Another thing, yeah. So stay in the city, apply for grants, and keep in touch with all of your. I guess I'm saying what you should do and what you shouldn't do. So don't leave the city. Don't not apply for grants, and don't stop talking. Don't stop talking to your peers. No, definitely keep in touch with all the people that you graduated from. And also, while you're there, like before you graduate, try to get in touch with those first year students, because they're going to be graduating the year after. And they're going to be an asset to your network as well. Like I've worked with people who graduated way before me and way after me, and a lot of people who graduated at the same time. So just try and build that network as much as you can of just the people who have also taken the same program as you, because everybody knows that struggle, and everyone will be able to kind of empathize with you having to deal with some of that stuff.
Also, good answer, man. And then, so where do you think the TV, well, not really, the film and the production world, where do you think it's going post-pandemic?
That's a really good question. I really don't know. I think there's things are going to keep getting made. There's no doubt about that. But it's going to be a lot harder to just film things with this whole regulation, like the masks and everything. I mean, I don't know how actors will be able to handle doing close-up scenes, you know? Are you just going to have to write masks into all of your movies? And I really don't know. It's really hard to say. But I think it's going to keep happening because people still have a passion to keep telling stories, and they still hopefully have all their gear. They didn't sell it off in a big panic, and their skills aren't going anywhere. So as long as there are stories to tell and people to tell them, they'll keep being told through whatever medium it happens to be of the day. I mean,
so you think the medium will just keep changing, but it'll still keep going, but maybe just differently because these people are passionate about stories and creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think VR is really going to take off. I really do. I hope it will, but I think it will as well.
Do you follow VAR closely?
Yeah, I have been a little bit. I've got an Oculus Rift in the box just over here. I haven't set it up because I just moved, but I do follow it closely, and it's very interesting. All of the new technologies that they're developing around VR, not just the headsets themselves, but like the controllers and the different kinds of tracking methods and all of the innovations that Valve has made with Half-Life Alyx and all of the crazy Steam VR stuff. I think it's really going to take off, and I think there are already a number of really good, not just games, but like experiences in VR. I mean, VR chat, for instance, it's not really a game because the only goal is just talking to people, right? You just go on there and you're in this little VR world and you just talk to random strangers on the internet who are, possessing these weird VR avatars. And so they can like walk up to you and like sort of touch you and stuff. And I don't know, it's really weird. You'll be talking to your brother and he'll be some anime girl. And meanwhile, you'll be like SpongeBob, and you'll be in this weird world where Corey in the House, the theme music is playing, and I don't know. It's a pretty weird experience. It's not really a game, but then there are also some really powerful stuff as well. There's this one piece called "The Skin We're In," and it's all about the 50s and this one kind of diner. I don't know. I only watched the first maybe 10 minutes of it. I think it's about a 45-minute piece, but it very much pertains to the Black Lives Matter movement and the whole, culture of that and the police brutality thing. And it's all done in VR. So it's this film that you're watching, and it's really cool. It's hard to explain, but you start off in a theater and you're watching a movie in VR, and then the seats all fade away and suddenly you're part of the scene, and then you're sitting at this diner and there's like all these people around you. You look in the mirror and it's like the old version of the diner from the 50s, but like you look back and it's just present day, and it's really realistic and really weird. But my only criticism, it doesn't have 6 degrees of freedom. That's the only problem with that experience. So it'll track your head movements like this, but as soon as you start moving back and forth or left or right or anything like that, all it can do is this and this, right? So it can lead to some motion sickness if you start moving around in your chair because it's not tracked in the game, and it can throw you off. I think you just have to be like sitting down in a chair that doesn't have wheels to
oh no. Got you, man. And then obviously nobody kind of predicted that the pandemic was coming, but who do you think will benefit from the pandemic happening?
China.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No, I think that's the thing. It's very interesting. I mean, this is becoming a completely different show now, but the whole thing with the WHO and their director and then one of their spokespersons, I guess you could say, they're really, really obviously in bed with China, because when they initially, like when they went to Wuhan and then they came back and they just had nothing but really nice things to say about China, and they didn't at all talk about how China was cracking down on the doctors who were just trying to spread the information, treating them like they were political dissidents or something. And they didn't talk about how they waited way too long to shut everything down. They didn't talk about how there were flights out of China, but all of the flights into China were stopped, right? They didn't bring any of that up. They just kept on, tooting the China horn. And it's like, dude, you're the director of the WHO. You're the director of the World Health Organization, and you're like taking orders from China. It's so that in itself really makes me question the WHO. I mean, I trust the vast majority of the medical knowledge and expertise that we have in Canada, but when it comes to the WHO, I don't know. I think that they're playing a little bit of a game on China's behalf, and I think like my main theory back when this was still like in the middle of things was that China was going to get the WHO to keep everyone locked down globally as long as possible, so that by the time China had recovered, they would be, China would be full speed ahead with their manufacturing, and everyone else would just be shut down, right? Because they're the first to get it, but they'd also theoretically be the first to eradicate it. And so my thought was that, well, now that the WHO is basically telling all of the countries what they should be doing, they're going to just force everyone to stay locked down, and everyone is going to have no choice but to get all of their manufacturing done in China, because it would literally be the only place. But now we're not really seeing that. We're in phase 2 here in Alberta, which is kind of nice. It kicked off a little bit early. There was that one Friday where we had only the 7 cases, so that was pretty cool. But I think that we really need to stop depending on China for so much of what we buy. I mean, you go to the dollar store and it's like 98% made in China. Why can't we do that, but do it up to a higher environmental standard so that we can be producing these goods without harming, the earth and the atmosphere as much as China does? Because there's like hardly any regulation. That's why everyone gets their stuff made there, is because they don't care what ends up going into the air. Although I guess that's kind of changed in recent years. Beijing has actually become one of the cleanest air cities in the world, surprisingly, which is crazy because I was there in 2013 and it was not nice. But I guess the Olympics really made people realize, like, oh man, the skies can actually be clear. Hey, why aren't the skies clear? So some things happened around that. But
right on, Matt. And then who do you think anyone stands to benefit from the little stoppage in on the film and production side? Like, are we going to see more smaller projects and less big giants? If you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be a lot more. I mean, inherently with this kind of thing, you just have to have smaller crews, right? Because there has to be more space between everyone if they want to work safely and they don't want to have to get tested every single day, or they have to, wear masks. But when you're on a movie set for like 12 to 14 hours a day and it's like 30 degrees and it's just boiling, you probably really don't want to wear a mask, right? That's just like the cherry on top. So I think it's going to have to be probably smaller crews going forward, which means smaller scale productions going forward. But I think the people who are really benefiting are the screenwriters, or the people who did benefit because they got all this wonderful free time to write their scripts while they were stuck at home, as long as they had the motivation to do that. I know a lot of people who just lost all motivation once they stopped going outside. So yeah, the screenwriters and the editors as well, all of those post-production houses, although really the people who are contracting them out are probably asking for them even faster because they want to get it out for all the people who were stuck at home. I don't know.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Who really stands to benefit? Who do you think stands to benefit from the lockdown in terms of media and film production?
Well, so obviously video can be done. So voice actors, because I know a couple of voice actors who benefited because all these people are like, oh, we almost need to retrain. So they were they were making money off doing voice gigs, which they always had done, because there was still, all these big companies still need voices and whatever for certain advertising. But then they were also able to add, oh, now I can teach all my friends over here and people around the world these workshops, so that's extra money. Ding ding.
Yeah.
So those people, I think those are the main people. And then obviously moving forward, just whoever can adapt to the new circumstances and move quickly to get these more smaller scale productions out to the world, because with all the suspensions and all these big movies behind, I think there's a small opportunity for a very small percentage of small scale productions to become much bigger than what they would have been if the pandemic hadn't existed, if that makes sense, because there's still a demand in the market, and there's still all these people still at home that have lost motivation, so you potentially got more eyeballs.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Yeah,
and then so kind of finally, what are some goals that you've got moving forward?
I would really like to actually start shooting this martial arts training video series with Greg. That would be really good to be able to start on. We've done a whole bunch of different tests, but the idea is that, at least the idea in the beginning, is that we'd kind of run a series of free videos on YouTube that would kind of just be very introductory, and then the rest of the more advanced stuff would be on something like Skillshare, right? And the thought is that, all these people who are stuck at home, they have nothing better to do than to learn martial arts, right? He has this whole system that he's developed where he's synthesized all of these different types of martial arts. So he takes things from like Aikido, and he takes things from karate, and he takes things from ninjutsu, and he kind of blends it all together and puts a sort of Western flair on certain things. And so, yeah, he's just developed this insane system that utilizes all of these different weapons and techniques and all this crazy stuff. And he's been developing it over the last 30 years, and he's written all these manuals about it. So I'd like to be able to get that out there and get people moving a little bit, not just so glued to the couch. The other thing is I'd really like to be able to go out and do more street photography. I honestly haven't done that much in the last few months. The last major, the last really kind of good day of photography I had was probably the protest that we had, the Black Lives Matter march that Calgary had a few weeks ago. I went out and I shot that, and that was really good. It was really nice. Everybody was very happy to have their photo taken. And,
really interesting.
Yeah, and I got a few just really nice shots, but of course, I go home and I look at all my shots and I'm like, wow, only 3 of those are good, and I took like 3,000. Man, I was really just spraying and praying that whole time. I don't know. I should have just stopped and thought a little bit more and gone up to people, and instead I photographed signs, which signs, everyone's got one. So yeah.
that's true, but yeah, it's quite a difficult subject because you don't know how people are gonna react, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so many different stances and kind of perspectives, obviously, on the matter.
Oh, absolutely. I just tried to be really neutral the whole time I was there. I mean, I didn't have a little media hat or anything, but I was pretty kitted out with all my gear, and I was just kind of trying to kind of, blend in a little bit, but also be distinct from the crowd, because I'm just documenting things. I was just trying to be kind of a fly on the wall. So Yeah, but I should have engaged more. That's my only regret. I should have actually gone up and talked to more people. The one really good photograph I got, it was of this one black woman with a really big fro, and she was doing the double peace signs, and she had on this, I think it was like a really nice denim jacket and like a yellow skirt, and she was in between like the yellow lines on the road, and it all just kind of lined up perfectly.
Oh, cool.
And but it was only because I actually went up and asked her, like I went up and talked to her. I saw her doing that before, and I was like, oh my goodness, that is so cool. I have to get a photo of that. And then I went up and asked her to do it again, and she did. And that's how I got that photo. So I don't know. Does that make it any less real? Maybe. It's not perfectly candid, but it's also like, I didn't set out to do that, so.
No, that's true. Yeah, it's because you spotted an opportunity within the environment that you were in, right? So.
Yeah.
And you guys like met randomly. It wasn't like, oh, yo, Jim, meet me down on 7 SE in 10 minutes, like with your thumbs up.
Yeah. Yeah, not staged at all in terms of any real premeditation. It was just kind of, hey, can you do that peace sign thing again? Okay. And then you do it. There's this really famous like contact sheet of this one street photographer, and the one image from it that everyone sees is of this girl in an elevator, and she's just kind of giving this like really kind of blasé sort of like, But if you look at the contact sheet, that photographer spent a whole roll on photographing that woman in that elevator, and he got her to do a ton of different poses. And the one that got published and that everyone knows was just like, it was like frame 16 out of 24 or whatever. And it looks candid, but it's totally not, because it's part of a set of all of these other photographs.
Gotcha.
But I think it's the same idea. Like, I don't think he met that lady in the elevator and was like, oh yeah, like meet me in the elevator. He just was like, hey, could you like pose for me while we ride this elevator? She's like, okay, and probably just did a bunch of weird stuff for him, and he was like, great. So I'd like to do more of that.
Awesome. So let's leave it. I guess we'll leave it with, you can either ask me a question, or you can give the audience a piece of advice based on networking and some of the things we've been talking about today.
Sure.
Which one do you choose?
I'll do the advice. Advice. If you don't get into a program that you really want to get into, just keep applying, because they love persistent people. If you keep applying, you're bound to get in. And if you just keep not getting in, then you should probably change something with your application, maybe update your resume so that it's actually accurate. The other thing, if you're a photographer, just keep shooting. Like, you have to make you have to make like 1 million terrible pictures before you make one good one. So if you go out for a day like I did the other day, and you just feel like all of your photographs are just garbage, that's okay. That's totally okay. That's all part of it. Just go out the next day, try to put a smile on your face, have a bit of a better attitude about it. And, even if you only end up with like 5 really good photos out of 500, hey, at least you were out there and you were engaging with people, and you were sharpening your craft. So just keep working on it.
Sharpening your craft. Love it. All right. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Coleman.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
No problem. So, guys, this was another episode of the Tea with Mike show. Coleman was fantastic, and you'll be able to watch this episode at teawithmike.com. It's the Tea with Mike show.